Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Syrupcast. As you may have noticed, we're recording a special episode from WWDC at Apple Park. And as you've noticed, it's not me and Patrick today. I'm here with a few special guests, a few other Canadian creators in the press. Right beside me is Brett Turner, who you may likely know from TikTok at brett.tech, I believe.
Brett.tech?
I would say a Victoria TikTok star with a strong focus on smart homes, maker gears, and what we've seen so far, Drew, a great taste in shirts.
Very, very aesthetically matched here. I like the look. I like the vibe that you're bringing to the table.
I had to pick the best for the big day. So.
Perfect. I think you killed it. And then obviously beside him is Drew Kozib from Gadgets and Gaming on Breakfast Television.
That's right.
And then also on the radio on Kiss FM. You've probably heard him. He's been around a while. We've crossed paths a few times, but this is our first time podcasting, and I'm very excited.
You didn't compliment my shirt. I just went based on what stunk the less after being here for so long and getting to see so many things over so many interesting days.
That's fair.
Drew, I think you look great.
Thank you. Thank you, Brett.
That's fair. But yeah, how are you guys doing this morning?
Doing good. I mean, this is the kickoff to our morning, and I can't think of a better way to do it. I think we've had lots of exciting things happen over the last few days, and I'm excited just to distill it all.
There's been so much different things, and after the keynote, there's obviously this big excitement, and then the following days, you sort of see what people latch on to when they get most excited about. So I'm excited to dig into some of those things that we're excited about and talk about some of the things that we've seen other people get really amped about.
Totally.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think just because we're Canadians, we'll probably start with what's coming to Canada, the most exciting, Vision Pro.
Yep.
And I guess maybe we'll jump in and we'll say the pricing, and then we'll kind of discuss some of the updates that we got shown off. And I guess how we feel about it. So I'm just going to go through the pricing quick, and then we'll get into it. So Vision Pro is coming to Canada. Very exciting. It's coming on July 12th with pre-orders on June 28th. It will start at $4,999, basically $5,000 for the 256 gigabyte model. And then they'll just skip all the way up to the 1 terabyte at $5,600. $700 for AppleCare Plus, $275 for the case. And glasses inserts range from $150 to $200. And just to kind of round that out, in the box, you get 2 straps, the one we see in all the photos, and then the one that goes over your head to kind of, I think, balance the weight a little more. And then there is a small front cover for the screen, but not a cover for the lenses, which we'll get into more. A light seal, a polishing cloth, battery, charging cable, and a brick in the box. But yeah, what do you guys think about the Vision Pro? How are you guys feeling about the pricing, I guess? We'll start with that.
I mean, the pricing that's within spot rate conversion of USD.
Pretty
right?
much.
So I don't think we saw anything surprising there. I think with the features that were released, I don't think we expected a big pricing shift or a price drop or anything. I think with the features we saw, we're getting closer to that fully ready for the broad consumer market. But I think by keeping the pricing where it is, Apple might be doing that a little bit intentionally to make sure that I think the people that are really going to appreciate it in its current form are the people willing to spend $5,000 on a piece of tech. Those are the people that will really be able to use all of the features. And I think if it were to be brought to the super broad market, I think it might be a little bit too in its infancy to really please that side of things. So I think the pricing is not only just a circumstance of economics, early stage, need to recoup their R&D cost, but maybe intentional to make sure that it's hitting the right subset of audience.
Yeah, because it is a professional tool. As much excitement as there's about the consumer applications and the way that you can look at your photos or experience media, I think that the people who are going to get the most out of it are people who are going to be using it for professional purposes. It has this professional price to go along with it. And then who knows? I mean, down the road, the naming convention of Apple Vision Pro suggests that eventually there will be a non-pro version that might have some different features that'll be more consumer friendly. But right now, I think it's hitting that right spot for the intended users.
Before we get too off that, I guess let's do a little speculatory game. Do you think the next one is Vision Air or just Vision?
Ooh.
I think Vision Air. I think they're really going to want to, because obviously the big, with any VR headsets, it's the big, the clunky. That's the concern. And Air really hits that. Again, I think we'll see a similar pulling the MacBook out of the folio. There'll be a Vision Pro coming out, and there'll be a speculation of him pulling out a battery, but there's no battery because it's built into the headset. And I think we'll get a similar release to that. I think the Air would be a must-have from the marketing perspective.
Yeah, I think name-wise, Air makes most sense too. Because like you said, I think one of the critiques we've seen so far from U.S. press is a bit of the weight, or I guess some global press that have tried it. And so yeah, Air, just by the namesake, suggesting that it could be lighter, I think will help people latch onto it a little more.
Yeah, I think Air is going to be the most likely naming convention. How soon we'll see that? I mean, I think we're still a little bit of a ways away from that.
Yeah, actually, that's maybe another good question. Do you think maybe WWDC next year, or do you think it would be something that would maybe get its own event now that it's out in the world?
Interesting.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe this is going to be a standalone thing for when the next one comes out, because who knows? Potentially, like when the Air model is ready, there'll be a different version of the Pro that maybe has the M4 chip or whatever point we're at in that M series.
Good point.
And maybe that could end up being a differentiator too for people who don't need like the super intensive workloads. Maybe they'll have a lower M series chip versus the new version of the Pro. So I could actually see whenever the Air comes out, full speculation, there being the next gen of the Pro alongside it to give people more choice to figure out what best fits their needs.
That makes a lot of sense too, right? Because assuming the Air will also have to run on the M1 chip, you would want to separate the Pro with a higher end chip. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Very cool. Should we talk into some Vision OS 2 stuff, or do you guys have anything else you want to kind of say on just pricing and what we think people might use it? Into the Vision OS then. So I think none of us have really, you haven't tried the
I have
the
not
last year
tried
yet.
it.
So none of us have actually tried it yet. We've talked to a ton of people. I think we are very well informed on what it can do, but so we might be a little janky on the OS stuff just because we have yet to use it. But yeah, so I would say the number one thing that I think jumped out and might be the biggest thing to most regular people is that there's spatial images or automatic spatial image making. You can take regular 2D photos and spatialize them for Vision Pro, and I think there's a lot of possibility with that.
Yeah, I actually had a friend who had an experience where they got access to the beta and they were able to take an old picture of their grandparents and bring it in. And from what they told me, it was like a very surreal experience. I mean, putting the technology aside, he was obviously excited to just experience it, see how it works. But when he got in, it was almost too much. It was so overly immersive that it was a shock. So that speaks highly to the feature alone, being able to take any old image and have it be that extent. I think it also brings forward some serious, like, I don't want to say ethics questions, but like a means of like where, like, should there be emotional warnings for these things? Family, or like should it be, hey, if you're using a picture of an old family, just get ready. This could be a lot for you. I think it's pretty incredible, and it opens up a lot of use cases with those historic images.
Thinking of taking like actual old real photographs and putting them in is actually a much cooler idea than taking like iPhone photos from the past few years. I think like baby photos of myself and my sister or something, or
totally.
like random stuff like that could be actually really, really interesting to walk down memory lane and like to show that to my mom. I think would be a way to sell her on something like this.
Totally, yeah.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Drew? Any thoughts on the spatial images?
I just like the fact that this photo library that we have in our phones now that has tens of thousands of photos, we don't have to start from like now moving forward.
Like the videos.
Exactly. We can go back. Because that's one of the things with like videos even now with iPhone 15 Pro. I see the little spatial thing in the corner. I'm like, should I turn it on for the day when the day comes that I get Apple Vision Pro in Canada? But knowing that this is now available to all of the photos that I've taken and uploaded into my photos library, I think that is so cool.
Yeah, I agree. And sort of just coming off the tail end of that, this isn't a huge topic, but they finally are adding support to Final Cut Pro, so you can edit spatial videos. I think we saw at the keynote there was like new lenses that were coming up for creators.
The Canon lens, right?
There was like a Blackmagic drone or something, I think, that had a thing. And then there was also this new Red Bull show where Red Bull was doing all this, I'm assuming, extreme sports stuff in spatial video. So I'm assuming they're shooting and editing in these programs. And I think we're not going to see a lot of it, but I think opening up the ability for just regular people to potentially make some spatial stuff might just start moving the needle forward, which is exciting, hopefully.
And we were talking about how right now the Vision Pro is truly that, a pro device. And I think that's going to be one of the things that really pushes that line to bring a consumer forward. Outside of the hardware advancement, it's building that media library such that there is enough stuff to enjoy right now. Like right now it is truly, we're getting quickly with the content library, but most of the work cases are work. You're sitting down, you're moving around with your Mac, blah, 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 you're consuming content. But I think once we reach that point where that content library is so large, you can buy it, get immersed right away. You have a choice of shows, you have a choice of selection. You can watch extreme sports, you should watch movies. That's when I think the consumer is going to say, wow, amazing, there's this huge library. And that's, I think, going to be the turning point. So it's great to see that they're investing in hardware and giving that to all the external parties to make sure that happens.
So if I could jump in on that point too, about how like we've had this like, sometimes when we're in Canada, we're like, everyone else always gets the cool stuff first. But with Apple Vision Pro, I'm actually super excited that there's been a couple months head start for like the developers to like get their apps ready. So like I think they were setting the stage for Canada to take Apple Vision Pro. They wanted it to be a great experience for us. So we're going to have more robust content. We're going to have more different kinds of apps and things to experience compared to getting it as soon as it launched. Yeah,
actually, and sort of speaking more on the consumer side of apps things, you were leading us down. Yesterday I was able to talk to some developers. One of the guys behind the PGA Tour app for golf.
Yes.
And then I didn't actually get to talk to these guys, but there was also people doing the NBA app. And yeah, I think sports in Vision Pro seems to be something that people are enjoying a lot, and being able to watch it more dynamic, like the golf thing, having the whole move in front of you and you can see the shots move through the air. And he was saying he wants to add wind direction so you can see the trees shifting and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's all really, really fun. Like that makes watching golf a little more fun. And I think that's pretty cool too.
The golf thing was really fascinating to me. I don't know much about golf, or I don't watch much sports, but just I know. What was interesting to me is just talking to him. Golf seems like a pretty difficult sport to spectate because there's a lot of movement of the ball. When you're going to watch it in person, you're kind of running around the course.
And even on TV, like you don't know which player is going to bounce onto the screen next. It's hard to go and watch your favorite players the whole way through. Yeah,
and what I love about how he was attacking using the Vision Pro is it's not so much just presenting the media just in a different format. He truly changed the way in which you spectated it. You could have the golf course in front of you. You could pull it up in front of your eyes. You could look at all the angles the players are shooting at. You could see the ball fly in real time and how it's navigating the course. Like, that isn't just watching sports. That's an entirely different experience. And again, to the consumer point, that's like, I think there'll be that subset of the audience that if I want to watch golf in the best way possible, I just have to do it in VR AR because it's the only option to get that level of immersion.
I'm going to pull us back off the golf tangent in a second, but the last thing he said to me that I thought was really, really interesting is he was saying on most of the majors golf courses, maybe even all of them, they have enough radar tech that they can generally predict where the ball is going to go as soon as it's hit, which I thought was just kind of a little interesting tidbit. But moving off to the next thing here, I think let's talk about the new gestures on Vision Pro. So we didn't see many new gestures come to Apple Watch, but there are, you can kind of like turn your hand, and then you can also use it to do volume when you're turning or something.
I think that's what it was, yeah.
I think there were 2 new gestures added, so we can't speak a lot to that, I think, because we haven't tested it.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see this gesture control scheme slowly start to get built out. Any thoughts on like what maybe would come next? I know it's hard to speculate without testing.
Yeah, well, and I think that for me, one of the first use case scenarios that I'm looking at is like productivity, especially the way that we saw like how with the new Vision OS, we're going to be able to get like even more expansive
the ultra wides. Yeah.
So like I feel like I'll be using it in conjunction a lot with like MacBook Pro to like have like that physical like keyboard and stuff.
There's a better keyboard pass through this year too into the XR. Like you should be able to see your keyboard through the space that you're in virtually.
And that's one of the things that I'm trying to figure out is like where that balance of having like the tactile feel to control things that I'm just so used to from like going into laptop world is going to get changed when all of a sudden we're using some of these gestures in Vision Pro and how quickly they're going to be working together. So things like, for example, with video editing, being able to maybe like set up the gesture so that I'm toggling between preview and program windows or things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see that relationship of like how much you're using like the physical world versus the gestures for productivity.
And actually another thing added on the productivity front is mouse support.
Yeah.
Which I'm again, haven't tested it, so I'm unclear, but I feel like it's one of those things that's so familiar to people. I'm worried that it may usurp the like cooler magical controls just because it might be so familiar. But again, haven't tested it. The eye tracking does look quite good, so maybe not, but it seems exciting.
I love the fact that they're moving aggressively towards that because I think that is
towards productivity
towards further gesture support. So I think that is something that, again, when we talk about going to the consumer market, sure, for the prosumer market, the pro market, there's that expectation of you'll be sitting at your desk and you have a keyboard and your mouse. But for the consumer market, I think the ideal is the device is 100% independent. You could interact with it almost as fluidly as you would with a mouse and keyboard.
Yeah, well, I think the thing we really need for that is to be able to multi-touch the virtual keyboard, which I'm hoping.
Fully agree, but I think this, obviously that is Herculean in a way of gestures, right? But I think this shows that we're progressing towards that. There's going to, I think we'll see small gestures that work towards that, and I think we'll eventually, like that is the dream, and I think we'll eventually get there. I mean, and I see this as the same advancement as like when we went from computers being entirely navigatable by keyboards and terminals, then they introduced the mouse, and it was like this weird foreign kind of supported things, and there was no operating systems that supported it, and nobody knew what was going on. And I think that's kind of where we're at with gestures right now. We're just kind of working on navigating it, and soon there will be like an organic means to interact with the virtual world. But we just need to start with these little things, dial those in. Eventually we get to keyboard. Eventually there's other things that we just don't know what we don't know at this point. And I think that will be the real breakthrough into the consumer market is once it's a fully independent device in that sense. One
of the gesture things that kind of, I'm hoping that someday they kind of nail down, but I would really like it if your like Apple Watch would give you haptic feedback from Vision Pro gestures.
Oh.
Yeah. Like, we were saying that game, you saw the Synth Riders game too,
Yep.
right? It was kind of like a Beat Saber, but for a Vision Pro. And they were saying one of the harder parts when we started it was hard to get feedback because it was so tied to the beat. We couldn't really use audio feedback. And because there's no haptics in the controllers, like when you would use on a regular VR headset, there's no feedback there. And it's not like you would put an Apple Watch on both wrists, but even one wrist for maybe not a game that intense, but for certain things or productivity could be handy. Or also, the other thing I was thinking too, just two kind of pro things that passed through my head as you were saying all that. Even being able to, on the go, pull out your iPhone and use that keyboard to type a quick message through Vision OS would be kind of cool.
I always think it's interesting you say the Apple Watch, because I was thinking about the same thing. It doesn't seem very Apple-like to offer gloves or something supplemental like that, but the watch is a really interesting point, and at first I would think, like, how would they make that? But I always think back to, with experiences like that, what was it called? The taptic feedback on the MacBook trackpad, and how much it felt like a click, even though it wasn't a click. And if they could somehow translate that same type of tactical experience through a watch, like, we know it's in them engineering-wise, that would kind of be the breakthrough.
It'd be really cool.
I'd love to see how they go about trying to implement that.
Yeah, same. I don't have a lot left on my notes for the Vision Pro. Anyone else have anything they want to say?
I'm excited to try it.
Yeah, same. So excited. We'll definitely have a lot to say later, I guess. Just the last thing on this notes is there's a new immersive video player for Safari. I know there was like a lot of video apps that weren't supported at launch, so it seems like this is a way to just watch video nicer through Safari to kind of like bridge that gap for the time being. Kind of exciting. We'll see where it goes. But should we hop into iOS customization and then other iOS updates and stuff? But customization is the thing I want to talk about the most. I guess we're going, for lack of a better term, maybe full Android, app icons anywhere, the tints, the dark mode, different icon sizes, super customizable control center. Which one of those kind of three things are you guys like looking forward to the most?
Just being able to rearrange the icons on the home screen is going to be so nice because, we're so careful with choosing just the right photo of our pet or our kids or whatever it is. So being able to customize that for that nice experience is super cool. But then using iOS to figure out if I did want to do a tint, what tint would actually look best, because sometimes I just don't think I have very good design sense. So the experience of me customizing it on my own, it's nice to have the guardrails, so to trust iOS to help match the tint to the picture so it's going to look the best, I think is going to be really, really nice.
That's true. We should say what Drew was talking about is, and we learned this in a briefing yesterday, is when you first turn on tint, they will automatically apply a color base in your wallpaper. You can obviously change it to anything, but it will auto hit you with something right out of the box.
And that's a nice starting point. Tweaking that afterwards and customizing to your taste, go for
Changing the saturation a little.
Totally.
What about you, Brett? Customization or?
I'm really excited about the control center updates. Yeah. Obviously, my background is in the smart home space, and I use HomeKit intensively, as well as I'm just an app power user, and I use the control center all the time. Your phone's locked; you just need quick access to something. And while it was okay before in its basic implementation, I think just having not only access to more controls, more customizable things you control, more control over the layout, but I forgot what they called it. But you now have multiple different control center tabs effectively.
Pages, yeah. And there's a quick action to scroll through them all really fast, which I didn't know at launch until we went to the briefing, and that was very handy.
Yeah, to navigate through them. I'm really curious to see, once I get hands-on, how that's implemented, such that being able to have that tab be dynamic based on your focus mode. So when I'm home, I get my smart home control. When I'm out, I get my more on-device controls. I think and from what I've seen on the UI, UX, I think the way they've implemented it is super elegant, and it's going to open up a lot of functionality for iPhone users.
One of the things I'm excited about the control center in general is there's a few apps that I kind of have on my home screen that are more like tools, I'm going into my Sonos app just when I want to turn on the night mode for my soundbar, and I'm going in, and that's the only thing I'm doing in it. And there's probably a few other apps like that too that I just kind of only use for one thing, but I use it every day, so I have to keep them on my home screen, and I'm really hoping I'll be able to kind of offload a few of those things into the control center area now, just because it seems like it's full of more tools and more third-party tools, which is very exciting.
Yeah, that was the other big thing. Yeah, for those who didn't hear, they released the ability for third-party developers to create their own control center. So, perfect example, little things like that, toggling your Sonos, preheating your oven, whatever it is, those are now going to be available natively, and I think that's going to change the user experience.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we could also take our pre-programmed shortcuts and put those in the control center as well, which is going to be huge because basically anything that you could imagine, you'll now be able to do right from control center. So for home automation, which is your expertise, if you want to do global settings for your home, great. But if you want to get more granular with specific settings for a mood in a room or a certain function in a room, I think that is going to be super cool too.
Yeah, hit the nail on the head.
I think there might be like 4 different ways that I can shortcut open Pokemon Heart Gold now.
You'll be unstoppable.
The world is your oyster
Catch them
now.
all.
Yeah, finally we'll catch them all. But yeah, and I guess kind of leading off of that too, though, the custom shortcuts and stuff you can do in the new control center, you can also apply to the action button. And I think it's the action. I think you can do a lot of stuff on the action button on the watch too. And then just, I guess, leading off of that, both watch and phone action buttons are open to third-party developers now, which ideally is like a huge thing they've needed for a long time, just getting more people making skills for this little fun button that we have. Like, I guess neither of you guys are wearing the Ultra, eh?
Sorry.
But you do have 15 Pros. What do you have your action button mapped to right now? Anything fun? Or I know you had a thing, Brett.
Yeah, so I have mine as a dynamic list. So when I push the button, it'll pop down a list, and it just has regular day-to-day things. I have some simple smart home controls. I have a toggle for my focus modes, as well as a camera open. And then usually when I'm on a trip, I'll have it open up my camera, and that's just location-based. So whenever I'm outside of my city, there's a shortcut that checks where I'm located, and it's just going to open up camera. Because when I'm not home, I'm not messing around with that stuff. I just want to take a picture when I see something pretty.
That's fair. Actually, side note, as a Syrupcast audience listener, I know we've talked a lot about shortcuts and how we've never quite found the perfect ones, but we found the guy who found the perfect ones. His name is Brett. Please follow him. He's got every shortcut, like the location. That sounded so cool.
I will, just as a pure speculation thing, so I don't know anything about it, with all of the new features that were released between AI and these different home screen features and all, I'm so excited to see how much of that is exposed in shortcuts. Because we get control over things like I said, even our home screen layouts, they added the ability on the note of the pull down bar. What were we just talking about? Action
button or notification shade, control center.
Control center.
Going
Sorry.
Brand name.
The control center items can now be dynamically hot swapped on your home screen. Like I'm really
or your lock screen.
Your lock screen.
Yeah,
sorry.
The flashlight and camera button can now be basically anything that could be in the control center or a shortcut. It seems.
Yeah, shortcut as well. I mean, that'll just be one of the items. I'm really curious to see how much control we get over that in shortcuts, because with all this customization, we're going to be to the point where you can radically change your phone's experience and what you use it for. You could have an entire home screen and icon layout for when you're on a trip and you just want access to minimal apps versus when you're at home and you want to enable yourself to use more social media, and when you're at work and when you want access to more productivity apps. I think we're really entering a realm where your phone's really going to be catered exactly to what you need. Doubling that up with AI, which I know we're going to chat about later, I think we're entering a really interesting place with iOS 18.
And the focus modes, depending which focus mode you use, can tailor your home screen, your lock screen, the shortcuts. We think the control center. We've yet to test that out. I know we've got a couple other things here. Oh, no, you wanted to talk about the satellite calling. It was or satellite texting, which is very exciting.
Yeah, that was pretty subtly dropped, but I think it's just incredible that they rolled that out. I'm really curious what the long-term marketing behind that is and the use case, because with the emergency SOS, it was truly marketed as an emergency feature. You're only to use it when you're in trouble, obviously, because it's used to beckon for rescue or similar.
Yeah, it only connects to like emergency services.
Yeah, but as with the SMS, I'm curious if it's intended to just be used like, oh, you're out for a drive and you don't have service, but I'm just texting my buddy anyway. Can I just use that satellite service as a piggyback and supplement for my personal SMSing? Or is it intended to only be used in emergency situations? You're hiking and maybe it's not dire straits and you need rescue, but hey, I'm on my way home. Like, are we going to be limited in the amount of bandwidth we could use with it? I don't think it's been super clear in the marketing how.
And it is US first at launch, so we won't be able to
so we won't know anyway, but I think the feature is incredible that we're going to have access to it, but I'm curious how it's intended to be used.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Brett is from the West Coast. Do you find, so you're in like kind of a TELUS realm, and for our audience, do you find that there are some more dead zones, or is it pretty, well, what's the coverage like over there?
It's most of the zones are dead. There's good coverage in the cities, but obviously being on the West Coast, there's lots of hiking and there's lots of off the grid. Really, anytime you spend 3 hours walking out somewhere, you're gonna be hurting for a reception, and that's why it was so front and center to me. Is sure, I might not be in in danger, but I may want to text my friend and say, hey, I'm going to be an hour late for dinner or whatever, right? And like, is that an acceptable use for it? Or should, like, I just don't know what the intention for the satellite SMS is.
And that's so interesting because I didn't realize like the use case scenarios in that, because I'm just used to like coverage all the time. But in that scenario, do you think it's going to change the way that you're like, for example, if you're hiking or exploring, like, are you going to get more adventurous because now you know you've got that little extra safety net? Are you going to do less coordination ahead of time to be like, I'm supposed to be here at this time?
I would feel a lot more comfortable, and like there are devices out there on the market that do something similar, but Garmin, InReach, but the thing is they're clunky, they're expensive, and it's like there's no keyboard. You're like navigating a little cursor to type your letters. I think depending on how they bring it forward, it could truly change not only just in the worst case scenario, but just the level of comfort going into it. There could be people that take more hikes because they have that level of security that they think if something does happen, they can still reach out to home, and they still have that level of security to enable them to do those things. And
even having just one less device to pack with you, worry about battery, to whatever, like that's just so much more.
You don't need to buy a $400 Garmin anymore. For us West Coasters specifically, I think it'll be West Coast in the States.
Well, no, there were lots of like hiking everywhere. I think across Canada, lots of people camped, and there's lots of dead zones. I was just curious of your experience with it, but yeah, I think that's a big thing. I'm excited to see. I think there might be a little bit of a dark side to it potentially because emergency SOS via satellite was announced as a feature that was free for now, and that it might get paid at some point. And I do think this being so much more useful, or so much more like you could use it day to day rather than like only when you're in an actual emergency, I think it might convince people to pay for it a little more. We might finally see that
this is them delivering enough value to feel like they could bill for it.
I think so, but we'll see. And I think that will still be like a year out or something. They'll probably still test this extensively to see how many people use it and what people are getting out of it. But it does seem like this is a much more concrete step to giving something a lot more stronger value. Yeah.
And if they are billing for it, I could see it leaning more towards that side of being used more casually, if you will. And like if that's the case, I would pay $10, $20 just for that extra security.
I would just hope it gets rolled into Apple One in like the higher tier.
That's a good idea too, actually. Yeah. One of the things I think that might be possible in the States, but I wish we had customizable Apple One bundles. I just want like 4 of the things, and I don't want like I don't need news and all that other stuff. Yeah. Anyway, some other tangent we'll get on some other day. Another thing that kind of came out that's exciting for me using like my Fuji camera app to connect to my phone all the time is apparently when you connect to devices being Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, there's like a new like pop-up similar to AirPods or something? Do you know more about that with home devices and stuff?
Yeah, I looked a little bit into that. There's not a ton of documentation on it, but for those who have ever used AirPods, when you open up the case, there's that really nice little UI that pops up on the bottom that just says connect.
I think it might work with some Beats headphones too, but it's not very many.
It's most, I believe it's almost exclusively limited to Apple products or very closely developed by Apple. And even there's a few other things that are exposing to outside developers, but even just that UI is just such a clean experience when you're, let's say, connecting. I'm trying to think of other options, like even maybe you have like a stand-up paddleboard with a motor in it or something. And
they showed like karaoke mics on stage.
Things like that. And right now it's like the clunky little Bluetooth pop-up menu and settings and all that. It's just a much more Apple-esque experience and a much better user experience to connect. And
I don't know about your guys' experience with different people and different, like watching people use their phones, but I find when people see that little pop-up, they don't read it. They just say yes or they say no, but like people don't read those pop-ups, and they just like they're so used to them being like an annoyance that they're just trying to get them out of their face.
Whether it's forward or back or cancel, whatever gets us out of here.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think this new interface looks a little more important, a little more easily accessible, and I think that just will smooth things over.
I think it removes some of the like tech barriers for people who are much more casual users. So like, thinking about my parents, I'm trying to get them set up with a set of Bluetooth headphones. Let's say they didn't have AirPods something else. Like, same thing. Yeah, like that is a nightmare for us because you're trying to explain it to them.
It's at least 3 FaceTime calls. It's like the initial setup, one time when they're practicing, and then when they're actually trying to use them.
And then every time where it doesn't connect from that point forward throughout history. But like, yes, for like that like extra confidence of it just looking like the Apple experience, I think that's going to make it less intimidating for people to be using these accessories. It's going to save us some time to help with the troubleshooting. And like that, I think we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but like there's just some new tools that are going to make it easier for people who are not as tech-minded to do more things with their devices, or for us to be able to swoop in later on to help people out with their devices.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, the tech support angle I didn't really think about, but yeah, I did the same thing. Get my parents Bluetooth headphones. I wish I would have been able to get them AirPods, but yeah, it's can be tough. I think that's about most of the customization stuff. We're kind of getting into what we're excited about. So I'm going to take some time to talk about some of the things that I'm really looking forward to. I've been doing a lot of camping last summer. I'm sure you guys saw my articles and stuff, but there's new hiking trails, and you can set specific trails now. There's topographical map stuff in maps, but that's still the US only. But it seems like Canadians are going to be able to set hiking trails, which for me on like a portage trip is really cool because I can like plan, I can drop on the map where all my campsites are. I can actually see how long, in theory, we don't have the elevation changes, but like I'll be able to more map those things in one app. I don't have to get all trails, I don't have to get all these other apps. So I'm kind of excited about that, but that's like a little camping thing.
And I know something that some people might have missed. I think it was either last year or 2 years ago, they introduced offline support for Apple Maps.
Correct. And so this is what we're working offline too.
Yeah, so those paired together is going to be a really great experience for anybody that's off the grid, camping, hiking.
Mm-hmm. And I guess it probably should work on the watch, but I don't know if they talked about that. But that would be exciting too. I know when I went last year, I could see like the dots where my campsites were. So yeah, having that.
Every Apple Maps feature that's come through an iPhone is ported well over the watch. I'd be surprised if it doesn't. Yeah.
Same. And then I guess just on my last little camping tangent, they finally added GPS tracking to rowing directions. So I'm super excited that now when I'm like portaging and canoeing, I can actually see like how far I went that day and how long it took me and what like my speed was. I know it's rowing and canoeing are not exactly the same, but just that GPS track is like pretty exciting for me. Is there any like little stuff like you guys are kind of excited about came out, like little side things?
One thing that wasn't even actually mentioned in the keynote, but came out in the developer front on the smart home space is some changes to HomeKey. So for those who don't know, HomeKey is the feature that allows you to either tap your Apple Watch or iPhone to a smart lock to authenticate and unlock it. Really great feature, something that most smart home users use daily. But they're changing that tap NFC support, which requires physical contact with the lock or very close to ultra wideband support, which is similar tech they use for like AirPods finding and things like that. So now to unlock your door when you're walking home, you no longer need to pull out your device and tap to the lock. You just need to get within 3 to 6 feet of it, and your door will authenticate and unlock based on your device. And it's for regular smart home users, I think that's going to be something that just passively comes through in the update that's going to change how a lot of people interact with their home.
It sounds so convenient.
It's such a little thing. And again, we didn't get much smart home love in the keynote, but another little one that came out is robot vacuum support, which is something that's been wanted in HomeKit for a while. Not only excited for that for the smart home users that have vacuums that they do want integrated in their HomeKit experience, but I also think that's going to be a really good gateway into HomeKit for a lot of users. I think there's a lot of people nowadays have a robot vacuum or a vacuum of some sort, and I think that's going to be one of the first devices a lot of these people are going to add into HomeKit and kind of get exposed to the ecosystem.
Yeah, that's a good point because it's usually like kind of lights, locks, but vacuums are something that a lot of people do have, and finally being able to put it in there is exciting. Do you have a robot vacuum?
Yeah, I have multiple. Yeah, I use
a little robot rumble in the basement kind of thing going on.
I've got a closet of them. I got to keep a lock on it just in case they get out one day and take over. Got to be careful of that. But yeah, I use Depot vacuums right now.
Cool.
They've got a really good line between mopping and cleaning and like auto emptying. I'm really curious to see the robot vacuum space is moving really quickly. Mm-hmm. Curious to see what like child traits they expose in HomeKit, whether you see your like dust bin capacity or your water capacity for mopping or all of these things, or if it's just going to be a binary on-off. Really curious to see how that implementation goes.
Usually that's pretty well thought out. Like a lot of the camera stuff added to HomeKit had like more stuff.
Especially if it's a known independent device type. Sometimes with like when it's a switch and you're just turning a vacuum on and off, some have kind of hacked that integration in. But if they're going as far as exposing a device type, usually they'll put consideration. So I'm excited to see how they do that.
Mm-hmm. And vacuums is a good example of that too, because there's a lot of combo ones now too. So being able to get granular into seeing like the mopping or dusting modes, or like checking out the different maps or progress or estimated times, or like do you need to fill the cleaning solution in the mop? So
yeah, and like we'll cut this off soon here, but like vacuums are interesting such that there's different room control. Vacuum your room. Are you going to have your vacuum exposed to each individual room in your HomeKit home and be able to control it? I'm really curious to see how they handle the UI UX there because there's so much potential.
I've learned that we really get excited about smart cleaning products. This is fun.
I think
we found our pocket.
Yeah, I think our audience is probably owning a lot of robot vacuums as well. So I think there's a lot of people excited for this one. I guess one of the other things that's kind of on there that it popped up, it's part of the intelligence a little bit, but typing to Siri. Do you guys ever think that was something that you wanted to do?
Yes, that comes up all the time. When I saw that, I was like, this is amazing, because it's in those scenarios where you're getting through that Siri request, but you can't be audible, or maybe you want to follow up or do something extra. So just being able to switch off and get into typing mode, I think is going to be very, very fantastic. And I mean, they're finding different ways for us to interact with Siri, like
so many new ways.
Example with like AirPods being able to nod or shake our heads.
Yeah. I'm so excited for that one.
Yeah.
Too.
So like I just like the way that we're gonna get to like Siri and Apple Intelligence has so many implications, but just these smaller, simpler things I think are gonna improve the Siri experience even further without even having to necessarily tap into the depth of Apple Intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot in here. I guess, actually, the last thing we have in this sort of grab bag section, although maybe we should just segue into Apple Intelligence, but the math notes. I think that blew us all away, both on stage and then when we were in the briefing as well. Like, why is that so cool? I hate math. What the heck, guys?
Yeah, that's a good sign if the anti-math guys say
that's true.
I truly think like with the way that's implemented, I think whole education curriculums can be built around that functionality, that level of interaction and that level of like tactility and things happening in real time and being able to show you graphs and how they're modeled and manipulate data in real time. Like none of this is like new concepts necessarily, but the way it's implemented.
How magical it is.
How magical it is. Like I would trust giving that to my parents, and I think they could navigate it in a second. Like it's just so simple and intuitive. And I mean, that's one of those things that seems so simple on the surface, but I can't imagine how complex that was technically. Like that is Herculean that they were able to pull that off, and like the handwriting correction.
Yes.
And how all the things on the page can be tied together regardless of where they're drawn or where they're written, and everything just works. Like you can draw the graph up here and the variables will appear in the chart down here and you can just appear. It's insane.
And like it was so funny being at the keynote in person because like there's like these big moments. You wouldn't think that the calculator announcement
when you hear the cheers.
That was one of the biggest like audible moments of the whole thing. And that was before we even got to see the integration with Apple Pencil and iPad. But one of the things I really like about this like new system of being able to actually like write out these equations is you still have to understand the core concepts of whatever math problem that you're doing. So it's not replacing like learning, it's just speeding up that end result. So like
it's just a calculator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like this is not going to, I think, undermine like any work that's happening in the classroom. I think it's just going to enhance the way that curriculums can be tailored so that students can do even more in-depth and cool things in such a impactful and like exciting way. Like if we would have had, like remember our terrible graphing calculators that we had to use and we thought those were cool. Well, the kids today, they don't even know how good they got it.
And on that note too, I think something super important. I was reading an article about somebody who's done some deep diving in here. There is quite a few configurable settings specifically in the autocomplete.
Yeah.
And whether or not you want that to come forward and you could toggle and have answers. So it's not necessarily going to be just doing all your work for you. I think it truly has potential to be a learning tool. Again, especially when you put some structure and curriculum around it, I think I do truly think it will change the way that education works in that space.
Because it's not making up you still have to know the formulas. It's just
you still have to write it out.
Exactly, yeah.
And while we're in the grab bag and kind of talking about Apple Pencil and iPad, one of the things that I was so excited about, and this goes back to the tech support of the help with parents, is that new SharePlay feature.
Huge.
So with SharePlay, which you can use for a variety of things, but in this new context, you're going to be able to help out a friend. So if they're on iPad and they're like, where's the app for whatever? You'll be able to use your Apple Pencil and actually draw a circle, point to the thing. And if they're still confused, they can give you permission to remotely get into their iPad to do the thing, which I think is going to be so helpful. Like I'm thinking about my parents, again, some of the barriers they have with like getting stuff to work on their Apple TV from their iPad.
Like anytime you have to get your parents through the Files app is like, you know you want to be there in person.
Yeah.
Anything Bluetooth.
Yeah.
You gotta.
Exactly. You know, they'll get photos of the grandkids and they'll want them to be on, how do I get this on the Apple TV? So like the things like that, like I'll just be able to show them and highlight so they can learn. But if there's just not that time, you know, being able to remotely get into someone's iPad to help them out and just the way that's sort of like authenticated, get the little pop up to like admit somebody. Similar to like when you're accepting an airdropped file, I think like, you know, it's just very clear who's doing what, when, and how it all works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think just backing up a little bit to actually the math notes thing, just to kind of put one more cherry on it, I do think you will be able to do a lot of that stuff on Mac and iPhone too. Like in the regular Notes app, it seems.
Yeah. Oh, yes, on Notes, yeah.
From my understanding, they kind of coexist, like the math notes and the notes. So anywhere you have access to notes, you'll be able to do similar functionality where you could type an equation or write an equation and have it happen.
The iPad had the pencil, I think, which gave it the little extra sauce there.
Yeah.
I guess anybody else have anything kind of grab baggy, or should we talk about some Siri stuff?
Little one for me. We already mentioned the AirPods Nod, and I am over the moon excited for that. There's so many use cases walking around needing that, but also the AirPods audio noise canceling for calls.
The voice isolation.
That's something that being on a coastal city, very, very windy, and I have had some issues where I've had to, let me put away my AirPods and pull up my phone. So I think that's going to be a big game changer. I'm really curious to see how they implement it and what the result is.
Yeah, I'm actually curious. I have a lot of testing to do on AirPods in this update, but I use a lot of the hands-free stuff when I'm biking, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of wind in my ears. So will I be able to actually? Because previously, if I'm saying like Siri stop or whatever, like I'm trying to command Siri from the bike, it's like 50-50, maybe even 40-60. It's like barely working. But I'm hoping this voice isolation will help me like command a little more. And if it doesn't, at least I can shake my head yes or no. So I'm like. Yeah. A lot of my I just need to like get to the next light to try to like stop this thing. I can finally do a lot of that just by shaking or maybe talking more, and I'm pretty excited about it. Although yelling, "Hey Siri," while you're running down the street is like a little awkward, but I'm moving fast enough that I'm leaving the awkwardness behind.
They marketed it as just calls. I'm curious if that trickles down to inputs for because I agree. It's just as important, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess calls makes the most sense where it's happening the most, but fingers crossed for that. Then
fingers crossed.
But yeah, I guess I'm going to go into Apple Intelligence. I think the one thing that surprised me the most, wasn't expecting, image generation. I think it's done well, or done responsibly, maybe is the better word. But yeah, that felt kind of like a strange move. How are you guys thinking?
I mean, I think that people are finding more and more opportunities to use generative images in their work, whether that's just presentations or things like that. But what's really interesting about Apple's implementation of this is like we're definitely not trying to do anything photoreal. We're not trying to fool anybody into anything. So I think it feels like a very safe entry point into image generation for Apple. People, I think, are going to be very comfortable with this because it looks cutesy and fun. It's similar to
it's almost like a replacement for clip art, maybe.
Exactly. Like I think this is a really like nice little sandbox for people to play in, so that in future iterations, if things do end up more photoreal, like 2 or 3 years down the road, we'll already have a little bit of a base understanding of what's possible. And I like that there's the option of like the 3 different styles to be choosing from when you're generating these things.
Yeah, I do like the sort of drawn styles a lot. I think for like the clip art stuff that I would use for presentations or just little documents and stuff, I think that's kind of cool. I might be able to find some ways to use it. And I guess kind of even building off that, when I think you can do it inside the iWork apps and notes and stuff, but you can use a new version of the old Magic Wand. They basically brought the Magic Wand back, and now you can circle an image or something that you've sketched, and it will automatically AI generate something, and that's actually pretty magical, kind of cool, because I'm not much of an artist, guys. I'm not a good sketcher. A lot of stick people, so that could be cool. And then obviously I am a lot of a writer, so the proofreading and the text stuff. Mostly the proofreading I'm excited about. The rewriting, I don't know as a writer how much I'm into that thing, but what about you guys? Maybe for emails or something?
I think one of the things I was worried about when seeing, even down to the image generation, was just if they are able to implement it responsibly. And I think with when you put AI text generation, text augmentation in people's hands and put that so accessible such in messages, I think we reach a weird point where you're wondering, hey, is this message I just received from my grandma saying happy birthday authentic? Did she write this or did the AI write it? I was very pleased with how they didn't necessarily roll out any explicit generation or give you the full ability to change and tweak things. It was more, change and tweak things with radically new ideas.
They're summarizing.
They're very restricted to just changing the tone and editing, tweaking your grammar. And it looks to be very, very effective for that, but I'm glad they drew that line to not be able to give us to just generate any text out of nowhere such that everything's going to feel inauthentic. I think they implemented it quite well there.
And I think there's lots of different use case scenarios, and people are going to find their groove in terms of how they're using it. So for example, with me, I'll write an email that I think is going to be short, and it's just so long. And I'm like, I wouldn't even read this, and I know there's key stuff in here. So to be able to go back and be like, hey, summarize this to the main points. So I know that I put all the information in there, so I can feel confident in that. But now I don't have to go back and revise it myself after I wrote such a long email. I can trust Siri to do that for me and present that information. And then to that, being able to receive an email and then rather than just going by the subject line or that first little bit of text, allowing Siri to kind of pick out what the core important stuff is to show me that at a quick glance, I think is also going to be really helpful in terms of prioritizing things to know what needs attention right now.
That's fair. Yeah. To be honest, when I was even sending you guys the podcast notes, I was like, I'm going to be, I didn't use anything, but I was like, I told you I was going to send like a short bullet list thing, and then it kind of got out of hand, and I was like, oh, I've got to read some kind of summary at the top of this because there's a lot. It's like, you don't need to read anything. These are just outlines. If you want to add something under a category, go for it. But yeah, it was like something like that. I think it would have been useful. I probably would have maybe given it a shot at the very least.
And not even just an email is like, it's that, for understanding, that'll be available cross-platform if you're on
anywhere
a web
with
page.
a text box.
Yeah, or you receive a long document that you downloaded that may be legal or otherwise that you just need to get the rough idea and you don't want to read all 100.
Exactly. Yeah. Or if you're approaching a long web page just to get the quick summary to be like, is this actually the information that I'm looking for?
Totally.
Then you know, okay, yes, let's proceed with the human written stuff because I just got that little summary that I know that I'm going to get the answers that I need here.
Speaking of that, actually, the legal thing you said, running it through terms and conditions could be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, something that's so long that you're not going to read otherwise. I mean, I'd cautious to say even use it for anything legal, but for things like that, I think it'd be pretty incredible. And from my understanding, it's actually integrated not just as any text box. I think it's actually built natively into Safari, in which there's going to be your ability to any web page you're looking at get that same. What am I looking at? What am I reading? Like, is this what I'm actually looking for? And I think that could really change how we navigate the web.
Yeah, they kind of revamped the reader mode to add some like AI tools in there for like, summaries and stuff. Yeah, and I think when you're watching shows, it will tell you like who's in the show or
that was one of the tvOS updates, which they didn't spend very long on Apple TV, and I guess there was just not as much to say compared to all of the exciting things announced in the keynote. But that is one really nice thing is like when you're watching a show and you're like, who is that or what is that song? Not only will it appear, it'll also appear in the moment of that character appearing. So I think that is an extra little nuanced feature on there that's really helpful.
We're also getting Severance season 2.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, people are excited. But to be honest, I've been watching the Ocean's movies. I'm on a bit of a Matt Damon kick. That Matt Damon Casey Affleck movie looked pretty good too. I was like, and they were doing the Boston accents. I was like, classic. I'm down. So should be fun. I'm excited for a lot of the stuff coming out. And yeah, obviously Severance season 2. Yeah. And then I think what else we got in here for Siri? I guess just Siri in general. I mean, Siri is getting a huge overhaul. I don't know why we left this to the end, but you can ask it anything, and if it can't answer you, you get to ask ChatGPT instead. Maybe we should clarify the difference between those two actually before we get into it.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of digging on this, both in the dualities of the AIs and how they exist and how the data is handled, and after seeing all the different announcements from all the different companies who rolled out big AI updates, Apple has implemented it very differently, but in a truly elegant way, to where effectively what they're going to be doing is keeping all of your personalized data local on your device. So they effectively have a library of everything that is needed for you to drive your AI. Names, personal relationships, the things you like, the things you don't like, the places you like to go. All of that is going to stay entirely on device. And then anytime that data is needed to be leveraged, it's not like it's being looked at in its entirety. It's being fingerpicked for the exact piece of data that's needed. And then say you make a Siri request that needs to be computed, it pulls just that data and it's computed in most cases locally through Apple's own AI model. One thing I also got clarification of, is that the image generation is actually all Apple's AI. So when you're talking about the implementation of it and how they did it responsibly that's because
I think it was Apple artists too that trained it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's no ChatGPT, there's no anything at this point. Same with all the things that happen locally on device. There is no external AI is influencing that. When it goes off to the cloud for the sole purpose of just needing more computing power, it's going out to Apple's servers, and they've actually built their own servers and their own architecture for these requests.
And a lot of checks and balances to make sure those things are kept private and secure as well.
Most people, even if you think Apple's into security, most people don't understand the Herculean extent they go.
They're making it harder on themselves.
Yeah.
Well, to that point, they've built their own server architecture to the point where there's no remote shell access. So if somebody wanted to change a thing on a server, push an update, they have to be there in person. They have to be there and physically plug a cable in it to even get access to it.
And then they have to make those changes and get them approved by another party. And
and the servers that process any offsite data that needs to go for the bubble processing, for all intents and purposes, effectively only have RAM. They don't even have storage, so that when the data is getting sent out, it computes the data, it sends the request back to your iPhone, and then it just fizzles away. The only time when ChatGPT comes into play is when there's something more contextual you need. Apple train their AIs such that it's...
I would say maybe less. I feel like the Apple AI is very contextual to you, and then ChatGPT is more towards like more worldly questions.
Yeah, less contextual. And in those cases, there's a very intense system, again, very vetted, such that, again, they're only getting the tidbit of data they need. Things like IP addresses, any PII, personal information, all obfuscated when it gets sent out there. And yeah, there's a very aggressive line. I think the way they implement it technically is very, very admirable. And I think if you don't know much about this stuff, you could feel very comfortable digging into it. And even if you don't, there's a ton of documentation and third-party audits done on literally every step of the process.
They have
it's pretty
shared
insane.
a lot of this stuff if you really wanted to go in and read it, but it's probably a little dry.
It is very extra, super dry.
I think the fact that they're so transparent in showing their work and putting that all in front of us, and the way that there's like third-party audits that are not necessarily seeing the data, but seeing the process to make sure that those checks and balances are in place. Like, we can go into this with a particularly high level of confidence and verifiable steps that our data is being safe in these scenarios where it is being in these cloud computing. And to Brad's point, like, this is the hard way to do it. This is not the simple way for them to do it. They're making the user experience much more secure at their own detriment, because now this is a much more labor-intensive
more manpower,
way.
More hours. And it's not cheap to do it this way.
When you compare it to the other GPT, they also don't get any training data. They don't train their AIs off anything. When you compare it to the other companies, they're pretty much, hey, everything you give us is all ours to train our AIs. It's our data, and that's how it is. That's kind of the precedent right now. So the fact that they're going so far to the extreme when the other side of the coin is not even comparable to that is very admirable.
Yeah, I think one of the things we should say is like there was a lot of rumors going in that Apple was going to be using ChatGPT for its AI, but it seems like ChatGPT is just the first of many AIs that can be added to Apple's platform. And one of the examples they gave off was like you could be a lawyer and you would want like a law-specific AI, or you could be a fisherman and want like a fisherman-specific AI, and like those would be cool to implement. And I think those more hyper-focused makes more sense because ChatGPT is a little general, so it's hard to know what exactly you might want it for beyond everything, I guess. Yeah. But I think down the line, once these open up and more AIs are created and made and honed for specific tool-like purposes, it'll be really handy to have them built into Siri, I guess.
It's also very clear, too, when you're leaving the Apple experience to go to ChatGPT. Like, every time you will be reminded, so you will always know.
And there's some fine print with the ChatGPT at the bottom where it's like, check this for mistakes.
Yeah.
Make sure this is right.
Yeah. So do you guys think this is going to drive, the AI stuff will drive an iPhone upgrade cycle? Because it seems like it's only going to be on the 15 Pro, and then I think we can believe that probably the 16 series will get it as well, just because Apple's newer devices usually get the newest features. But that will mean only 3 phones on the market have it, and most of the market share won't. Do you think people care about the AI stuff beyond Genmojis? Because I think people are really excited about Genmojis.
I mean, that's funny, too, because I think when there's, like, super grounded implementation like Genmojis, like, people get excited and they can understand that. And I don't think people fully appreciate the benefits of how their day-to-day life would be changing with the AI experience. And I mean, that's part of what we can be doing, is showing people, like, these cool ways. Whether or not they actually listen to us or we convince them is another thing. But, when you show them something exciting like that. So to your point, like, I don't know if it's going to be resonating, like, instantly. But I think as other people see their friends doing stuff like working on an itinerary for the afternoon hike somewhere, they're going to go, oh, wait, and can Siri do that? And you're like, oh, what iPhone are you on? I'm on iPhone 13. No, but like it can't do it the way that I'm doing it. But then people become more and more aware. So I don't think there's going to be like this instant rush to upgrade like we've seen with some other devices where there's a drastic change between generation. But I do think now there is an incentive, like people still probably won't care about chips or like have that in part of their vocabulary, but they'll see what these certain phones can do, and they'll want that sooner.
It could be similar to, maybe you were going to say this, but similar to your sort of theory on why the Vision Pro have a higher price tag, kind of letting things settle with the more early adopters.
Yeah, I think a little bit of that, but not as extreme. But I mean, we to go back to the original question where you mentioned Siri, but we didn't actually get to chat on that much. I think Siri will be that big outlier. I think the Genmojis in a way, like that's just so front facing.
It's the first thing my girlfriend texted me about.
And I think like it's going to be the one friend who doesn't have it in the group chat. Everybody's going to be doing these cool emojis, and then it's going to be this. I think there's that's very optically clear.
The new green bubble is the non-Genmoji.
Yeah. The duality for Siri specifically, I think, is going to be very interesting. Not just for the fact of devices that you're choosing not to upgrade from, but just the devices that just blatantly won't support AI yet. And Siri HomePods are a really good example.
HomePods are a good question.
Watches are another really good example. And it brings the question up that I don't think we have a definitive answer on yet, is like, is Siri going to break off into two separate products where the Siri, as we know it now, call it Siri Lite, will that be serviced and maintained in such a way where it's its own product? And then the Siri that's leveraging AI will kind of open up a whole new world, right? Because Siri through AI is, for all intents and purposes, a different product. It could interact with your phone in a different way. It has access to so much more data. It has access to the AI to make decisions.
Looks different. Everything.
Looks different. Feels different. And then all of these other devices that are, call it, left behind, they're not going to have this experience. And those devices could be around for another 5-10 years, right?
Definitely.
So
I mean, a 14 Pro will go, or a 15 should go for
a HomePod, or all these things that still
right,
a watch
HomePods.
that we're wearing now. And like, I'm really curious to see how they handle the duality of having the same product that exists all alongside one another, just with
the same name.
Wildly different functionality. Are they going to continue trying to aggressively support Siri Lite, the old Siri, by bringing through AI features on there? Or are they going to keep that line hard drawn for the sake of incentivizing that upgrade? But I also don't think they could do that, because HomePods and Watch, where you use Siri all the time, they can't just drop that support, because they would have really upset customers. I think there's a lot of kind of nuance in between devices like that. It's going to be interesting how they choose to handle it.
You think they can dramp an M4 in this watch?
They should sure try.
I hope so. I like using Siri on my watch a lot. Just I find it so convenient, and the raise to Siri thing. So that would be a great one for me. I know we're kind of running low on time. So do you guys have any kind of last thoughts or anything you want to get out? Anything you've been thinking about?
I mean, we didn't really talk about scheduling text messages.
Oh, yeah, that actually got a big cheer too.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I think is one of those just like small nuanced things, because like you'll think of something, but you're like worried maybe it's an inconvenient time, or you don't want to forget it, or it's like you're like, I don't want to seem too eager about the barbecue on the weekend, but I'm really eager and I don't want people to know. So like you maybe be scheduling that close to the date. And I think the way that it's being implemented looks really cool too, because like those scheduled messages will be appearing sort of like above like your normal like text writing field. So like you'll know that it was there, you'll remember that it's there, you'll see that it's coming, and like I think that that's going to be a very nice feature when it rolls out. That that people will, maybe they're not excited about it now, but as they start using it in their day-to-day life, they'll really latch on, and that'll be one of the big things that people will be using a lot of.
Those little features are really where like the sweet spot is, where you don't even really think of it as exciting, but you just kind of start using it as part of your day-to-day, and then all of a sudden you can't live without it. I think that's going to fit very well in that category.
Yeah, I think so as well. One of the other things I was going to say that I'm kind of excited about is they opened up the API for double tap on the Apple Watch.
Yes.
So third-party apps can now use it. You can also use it apparently to scroll down through pages. So I'm excited about that kind of stuff coming.
So I'm actually a very intensive double tap user with Smart Home, because you can fudge it through accessibility and Siri and shortcuts and use that to trigger things. And it is just like being able to leave your home and turn off all the lights or things along those lines. And it's a really accessible, easy to use gesture that I think once we get full access to it across all our devices will be a really big deal.
Another thing I have on here that we actually didn't get to, but is probably a big thing. I know you've asked a lot of questions at the briefings. The Passwords app, the new Passwords app.
Yeah.
Big changes. We'll see if it makes people use it. I know loading passwords into a Passwords app is like the one digital chore that I've never been able to convince anyone to do unless they get hacked. So we'll see if this makes a difference. And auto-loading things from iCloud Keychain should be helpful.
I think this is one of the most like de facto Apple moves to where they're taking a feature and functionality that everybody knows they need to be doing. There's just a high barrier to entry. All other implementations are clunky. There's no good way to do it, and they're just taking all
Some
of
them have subscriptions too, which is
it's there's no like if my parents asked me like how do I manage my passwords, I wouldn't even attack that problem. I'd just be like, keep doing what you're doing, like you're probably fine, blah blah blah. But like it's just so elegantly served to you on a silver platter. I mean, sure, there's some innovation. They haven't reinvented the wheel on authentication or anything. They're just bringing it all in such a clean UI UX. They're making it so accessible cross-device to where you don't even need to think about it. They're, again, won't go into the nitty-gritty details because they're incredibly boring, but the security considerations on it and how it's handled across iCloud is incredible, to where I just think it's now accessible for the first time ever, as it should be, and it's more important now than it ever has been.
We actually learned this at the briefing the other day, Drew, and apparently I think you maybe asked this question about where when you want to change your password, there's a button to. I'll let you take it.
Yeah, so for that, the elegance of the interface there, you'll be able to see your passwords, and you'll also be able to see the ones that are potentially compromised, and from there will be a link to change that will connect to the actual whatever service it is where that password lives that did get compromised. So it does make it easier, and I was just thinking about how often I ignore the 47 compromised passwords. I feel like now I'll be like, ugh, and it makes it a little bit more systematic to get in there and tackle that job. So, plotting out that 2 hours on the weekend to actually do it and then do it properly and then know you're set up good with just a quick visual glance is going to be really nice.
Mm-hmm. And they were saying they just had some theories where a lot of the login pages, it's just the name of the website /login. So they're able to kind of predict where to send you in a lot of these cases, and they're just able to get it working in the back end. That was a little feature I liked. But we're running out of time here. I guess we should sign off. Where can people find you guys online, and how can they interact with you outside of this podcast?
My main platform is brett.tech on TikTok, but you could also find me on Instagram, brett.tech_, that same brett.tech_ on YouTube as well.
My name is Drew Kozub. I host a segment on breakfast television in Canada once a week called Geeking Out. I have a website called geekingout.ca, but my main platforms are Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, where you'll find me at Drew Kozub.
Nice. And then obviously I'm Brad Bennett. You can find me anywhere online at the Brad Fad. And then of course follow MobileSyrup everywhere at MobileSyrup. And we've got tons of stuff on our website about the show, all the kinds of little features we're uncovering. I know you guys have got tons of stuff on your channels as well. Definitely check it out. There's a ton going on. And thanks for listening. I'll see you guys online. And I guess it's Friday for us. So have a good weekend, everybody. Or is it Thursday? What the heck?
I couldn't even really tell you.
Fair enough. But thanks for coming on, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.